Mysteries await just a page away. Ready to dive in? Welcome to The Book Reader, where stories unfold one enchanting page at a time. Subscribe now and unlock the magic.
Of The Girl Who Played with Fire by Stieg Larsson.
Part 3. Absurd Equations. March 23rd to April 3rd. Chapter 15. Maundy Thursday, March 24th. Mom felt drained and miserable when he finally got home after the unplanned day at work. He smelled the aroma of something spicy from the kitchen and went in and hugged his boyfriend. "How are you feeling?" Arnold Magnusson asked. "Like a sack of shit. I've been hearing about it on the news all day long. They haven't released the names yet. But it sounds fucking awful." "It is fucking awful. Dag worked for us. He was a friend and I liked him a lot. I didn't know his girlfriend, but both Mick and Erica did." Mom looked around the kitchen. They had moved into the apartment on Allhelgonagatan only 3 months ago. Suddenly it felt like another world. The telephone rang. They looked at each other and decided to ignore it. Then the answering machine switched on and they heard a familiar voice. "Krister. Are you there? Pick up." It was Berger calling to tell him that the police were now looking for Blomkvist's former researcher, who was the prime suspect for the murders of Svensson and Johansson. Mom received the news with a sense of unreality. Cortez had missed the commotion on Lundagatan for the simple reason that he had been standing outside the police press office at Kingsholmen the whole time, from which no news had been released since the press conference earlier that afternoon. He was tired, hungry, and annoyed at being ignored by the people he was trying to contact. Not until 6 o'clock, when the raid at Salander's apartment was over, did he pick up a rumor that the police had a suspect in the investigation. The tip came from a colleague at an evening paper. But Cortez soon managed to find out Prosecutor Ekstrom's mobile phone number. He introduced himself and asked his questions about who, how, and why. "What newspaper did you say you were from?" Ekstrom said. "Millennium magazine. I knew one of the victims. I understand that the police are looking for a specific person. Can you confirm this?" "I can't comment at present." "Can you say when you will be able to provide some concrete information?" "We may well call another press conference later this evening." Ekstrom sounded evasive. Cortez tugged on the gold ring in his earlobe. "Press conferences are for reporters who have immediate deadlines. I work for a monthly magazine, and we have a very special personal interest in knowing what progress is being made." "I can't help you. You'll have to be patient like everyone else." "According to my source, it's a woman who is wanted for questioning." "Who is she?" "I can't comment just now." "Can you confirm that you're searching for a woman?" "I'm not going to confirm or deny anything at all. Goodbye." Holmberg stood in the doorway of the bedroom and contemplated the huge pool of blood on the floor where Mia Johansson had been found. He turned and could see a similar pool of blood where Svensson had lain. He pondered the extensive blood loss. It was a lot more blood than he was used to finding at shootings. Supervisor Martinson had been correct in his assessment that the killer had used hunting ammo. The blood had coagulated in a black and rusty brown mass that covered so much of the floor that the ambulance personnel and technical team had to walk through it, leaving footprints throughout the apartment. Holmberg was wearing gym shoes with blue plastic booties over them. The real crime scene investigation began, in his view, now. The bodies of the victims had been removed. Holmberg was there by himself after the 2 remaining techs had said goodnight and left. They had photographed the victims and measured blood splatter on the walls and conferred about splatter distribution areas and droplet velocity. Holmberg had not paid much attention to the technical examination. The crime scene tech's findings would be compiled in a report which would reveal in detail where the killer had stood in relation to his victims, and at what distance, in which order the shots had been fired, and which fingerprints might be of interest. But for Holmberg it was of no interest at all. The technical examination would not contain a syllable about who the killer was or what motive he or she, a woman was now the prime suspect, might have had for the murders. Those were the questions he now had to try to answer. Holmberg went into the bedroom. He put a worn briefcase on a chair and took out a dictaphone, a digital camera, and a notebook. He began by going through the chest of drawers behind the bedroom door. The top 2 drawers contained women's underwear, sweaters, and a jewelry box. He arranged each object on the bed and scrutinized the jewelry box. He did not think it contained any pieces of great value. In the bottom drawer he found 2 photograph albums and 2 folders containing household accounts. He turned on his tape recorder. Confiscation protocol for Bjorneborgsvägen 8B. Bedroom. Chest of drawers. Bottom bureau drawer. 2 bound photograph albums, size A4. 1 folder with black spine marked household and 1 folder with blue spine marked financial documents containing information about a mortgage and loans for the apartment. A small box containing handwritten letters, postcards, and personal items. He carried the objects to the hall and placed them in a suitcase. He continued with the drawers in the bedside tables on each side of the double bed, finding nothing of interest. He opened the wardrobes and sorted through clothes, feeling in each pocket and in the shoes to check for any forgotten or hidden objects, and then turned his attention to the shelves at the top of the wardrobes. He opened boxes and small storage containers. Every so often he found papers or items that he would include for various reasons in the confiscation inventory. There was a desk in one corner of the bedroom. It was a very small home office with a desktop compact computer and an old monitor. Under the desk was a 2-drawer filing cabinet, and on the floor next to the desk stood a low shelf unit. Holmberg knew that it would be in this home office that he would probably make the most important finds, to the extent that there was anything to find, and so he saved the desk for last. Instead, he went into the living room and continued the crime scene inspection. He opened the glass-fronted cabinet and examined each bowl, each drawer, each shelf. Then he turned his attention to the large bookcase along the outer wall and the wall of the bathroom. He took a chair and began at the top, checking whether anything was hidden on top of the bookcase. Then he went down it shelf by shelf, quickly picking out stacks of books and going through them, also checking whether anything was concealed behind them on the shelves. After 45 minutes he put the last book back on the shelf. On the living room table was a neat stack of books. He turned on the tape recorder. From the bookcase in the living room. A book by Michael Blomkvist, the Mafia's banker. A book in German entitled Der Staat und die Autonomen, a book in Swedish with the title Revolutionary Terrorism, and an English book Islamic Jihad. He included the book by Blomkvist because its author had turned up in the preliminary investigation. The last 3 works were perhaps less obvious. Holmberg had no idea whether the murders were related to any form of political activity, or indeed whether Svensson or Johansson was politically involved, or whether the books were merely indicative of a general interest in politics as part of their academic or journalistic work. On the other hand, if 2 dead bodies were found in an apartment where there were books about terrorism, he was going to make note of the fact. He placed the books in the suitcase with the other items. Then he looked through the drawers in an antique desk. On top of the desk was a CD player, and the drawers contained a great number of CDs. Holmberg spent half an hour opening every CD case and verifying that the contents matched the cover. He found about 10 CDs that had no label, and were probably burned at home or possibly pirated copies. He inserted the ones without labels into the CD player to check that they were not storing anything besides music. He examined the TV shelf nearest the bedroom door, where there was a large collection of videocassettes. He test-played several of them. They seemed to be everything from action movies to a hodgepodge of taped news programs and reports from Cold Facts, Insider, and Assignment Scrutiny. He added 36 videocassettes to the inventory. Then he went to the kitchen, opened a thermos of coffee, and took a short break before he went on with his search. From a shelf in a kitchen cupboard he gathered a number of jars and medicine bottles. They too were placed in a plastic bag and added to the confiscated material. He picked out foodstuffs from the pantry and refrigerator and opened every jar, coffee package, and recorked bottle. In a pot sitting on the windowsill he found 1,220 kroner plus some receipts. From the bathroom he took nothing, but he did observe that the laundry basket was overflowing. He went through all the clothing. He took coats out of a closet in the hall and searched in every pocket. He found Svensson's wallet in the inner pocket of a sports jacket and added it to the inventory of confiscated items. Svensson had a membership card to the Friskis and Svetti's gym chain, a Handelsbanken ATM card, and just under 400 kroner in cash. He found Johansson's handbag and spent a few minutes going through its contents. She also had a card to Friskis and Svetti's, an ATM card, a Konsum Co-op loyalty card, and a membership card to something called Club Horizon, which had a globe as its logo. He found about 2,500 kroner in cash, a relatively large but not unreasonable sum, given that they were on their way out of Stockholm for the holiday weekend. That there was money in their wallets did reduce the likelihood of their deaths being robbery-related. From Johansson's handbag found on the shelf above the coat rack in the hall. One Pro Plan pocket diary, a separate address book, and a leather-bound black notebook. Holmberg took another break for coffee and noted that for a change he had so far found nothing embarrassing or intimate in the Svensson-Johansson couple's home. No hidden sex aids, no scandalous underwear, no drawer full of pornographic videos, no marijuana cigarettes or any sign at all of other illegal substances. They seemed to be a normal couple, possibly, from a police standpoint. Somewhat duller than average. Finally he returned to the bedroom and sat down at the desk. He opened the top drawer. He soon found that the desk and shelf unit next to it contained extensive source and reference materials for Johansson's doctoral thesis, From Russia with Love. The material was neatly arranged, exactly like a police report, and he lost himself for a while in certain sections of the text. Mia Johansson was good enough to be on the force, he told himself. One section of the bookshelf was only half full and seemed to contain material belonging to Svensson, mainly press clippings of his own articles and others on subjects that had interested him. Holmberg spent a while going through the computer and found that it held almost 5 gigabytes, everything from software to letters and downloaded articles and PDF files. Certainly he was not going to be able to read through it in one evening. He added the computer and assorted CDs and a zip drive with about 30 disks to the confiscated items. Then he sat brooding for a while. The computer contained Johansson's work, as far as he could see. Svensson was a journalist, and a computer ought to be his most important tool, but he did not even get email on the desktop. So he must have had a computer somewhere else. Holmberg got up and went through the apartment, thinking. In the hall there was a black backpack with some notebooks that belonged to Svensson and an empty compartment for a computer. He could not find a laptop anywhere in the apartment. He took the keys and went down to the courtyard and searched Johansson's car and then the apartment's basement storage area. He found no computer there either. The strange thing about the dog is that it did not bark, my dear Watson. He made a note that at least one computer seemed to be missing. Bublansky and Fast met Ekström in his office at 6:30 p.m., soon after they returned from Lundagen. Anderson, after calling in, had been sent to Stockholm University to interview Johansson's tutor about her doctoral thesis. Holmberg was still in Enskede, and Modig was running the crime scene investigation at Odenplan. 10 hours had passed since Bublansky was appointed leader of the investigative team, and 7 hours since the hunt for Salander had begun. "And who is Miriam Wu?" Ekström said. "We don't know much about her yet. She has no criminal record. It'll be Fast's task to start looking for her first thing tomorrow morning. But as far as we could see, there's no sign that Salander lives at Lundagen. For one thing, all the clothes in the wardrobe were the wrong size for her. And they weren't your typical clothes, either," Fast said. "Meaning what?" Ekström asked. "Well, let's just say they weren't the type of clothes you'd buy for Mother's Day." "We know nothing about the Wu woman at present," Bublansky said. "How much do you have to know, for God's sake? She has a closet full of whore outfits." "Whore outfits?" Ekström said. Black leather, patent leather, corsets, and fetishist whips and sex toys in a drawer. They didn't look like cheap stuff, either. Are you saying that Miriam Wu is a prostitute? We know nothing about Froken Wu at this stage, Bublansky said a little more sharply. One of Salander's social welfare reports indicated a few years ago that she was involved in prostitution, Ekstrom said. And social welfare usually knows what they're talking about, Fast said. The social welfare report was not supported by any police reports, Bublansky said. There was an incident in Tanto, London when she was 16 or 17. She was in the company of a considerably older man. Later the same year she was arrested for being drunk in public. Again with a considerably older man. You mean that we shouldn't draw conclusions too hastily, Ekstrom said. Okay. But it strikes me that Johansson's thesis having been on trafficking and prostitution, there's a possibility that in her work she made contact with Salander and this Wu and in some way provoked them, and that this might somehow constitute a motive for murder. Johansson might have got in touch with Salander's guardian and started the whole merry-go-round, Fast said. That's possible, Bublansky said. But the investigation will have to document that. The important thing for now is to find Salander. She's obviously no longer living on Lundagaten. That means we also have to find Wu and discover how she came to live in that apartment and what her relationship with Salander is. And how do we find Salander? She's out there somewhere. The problem is that the only address she ever had was on Lundagaten. No change of address was filed. You're forgetting that she was also admitted to St. Stefan's and lived with various different foster families. I'm not forgetting. Bublansky checked his papers. She had 3 separate foster families when she was 15. It didn't go well. From just before she turned 16 until she was 18, she lived with a couple in Hagerston. Frederick and Monica Gullberg. Anderson is going out to see them this evening when he's finished at the university. How are we doing on the press conference? Fast said. The mood in Berger's office at 7 o'clock that evening was grim. Blomkvist had been sitting silent and almost immobile ever since Inspector Bublansky had left. Eriksson had cycled over to Lundagaten to watch what was going on there. She reported that no one seemed to have been arrested and that traffic was flowing once again. Cortez had called in to tell them that the police were now looking for a second unnamed woman. Berger told him the name. Berger and Eriksson had talked through what needed to be done, but the immediate situation was complicated by the fact that Blomkvist and Berger knew what role Salander had played in the denouement of the Wennerström affair. In her capacity as elite-level hacker, she had been Blomkvist's secret source. Eriksson had no knowledge of this and had never even heard Salander's name mentioned. So the conversation occasionally lapsed into cryptic silences. I'm going home, Blomkvist said, getting up abruptly. I'm so tired I can't think straight. I've got to get some sleep. Tomorrow being Good Friday, I plan to sleep and go through papers. Malin, can you work over Easter? Do I have any choice? No. We'll start at noon on Saturday. Could we work at my place rather than in the office? That would be fine. I'm thinking of revamping the approach that we decided on this morning. Now it's no longer just a matter of trying to find out if Dag's exposé had something to do with the murders. It's about working out, from the material, who murdered Dag and Mia. Eriksson wondered how they were going to go about doing any such thing, but she said nothing. Blomkvist waved goodbye to the two of them and left without another word. At 7:15, Inspector Bublansky reluctantly followed Prosecutor Ekstrom onto the podium in the police press center. Bublansky had absolutely no interest in being in the spotlight in front of a dozen TV cameras. He was almost panic-stricken to be the focus of such attention. He would never get used to or begin to enjoy seeing himself on television. Ekstrom, on the other hand, moved with ease, adjusted his glasses, and adopted a suitably serious expression. He let the photographers take their pictures before he raised his hands and asked for quiet. I'd like to welcome you all to this somewhat hastily arranged press conference regarding the murders in Enskede late last night. We have some more information to share with you. My name is Prosecutor Richard Ekstrom, and this is Criminal Inspector Jan Bublansky of the County Criminal Police Violent Crimes Division, who is leading the investigation. I have a statement to read, and then there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. Ekstrom looked at the assembled journalists. The murders in Enskede were big news, and getting bigger. He was pleased to note that Aktuelt, Rapport, and TV4 were all there, and he recognized reporters from the TT Wire service and the evening and morning papers. There were also quite a few reporters he did not recognize. As you know, 2 people were murdered in Enskede last night. A weapon was found at the crime scene, a Colt .45 Magnum. Today the National Forensics Laboratory established that this gun was the murder weapon. The owner of the weapon was identified, and we went looking for him today. Ekstrom paused for effect. At 4:15 this afternoon, the owner of the weapon was found dead in his apartment in the vicinity of Odenplan. He had been shot. He is believed to have been dead at the time of the killings in Enskede. The police, Ekstrom here gestured towards Bublansky, have reason to believe that the same person was responsible for all 3 murders. A murmur broke out among the reporters. Several of them began talking in low voices on their mobile telephones. "Have you got a suspect?" a reporter from Swedish radio called out. Ekstrom raised his voice. "If you would refrain from interrupting my statement, we'll get to that. This evening a person has been named whom the police want to question in connection with these 3 murders. Will you give us his name, please?" "It's not a he, but a she. The police are looking for a 26-year-old woman who has a connection to the owner of the weapon, and whom we know to have been at the scene of the murders in Enskede." Bublansky frowned and then looked sullen. They had reached the point in the agenda over which he and Ekstrom had disagreed, namely the question of whether they should name their suspect. Ekstrom had maintained that according to all available documentation, Salander was a mentally ill, potentially violent woman and that something had apparently triggered a murderous rage. There was no guarantee that the violence was at an end, and therefore it was in the public interest that she be named and apprehended as soon as possible. Bublansky held that there was reason to wait at least for results of the technical examination of Bjurman's apartment before the investigative team committed itself unequivocally to one approach. But Ekstrom had prevailed. Ekstrom held up a hand to interrupt the buzzing of the assembled reporters. The revelation that a woman was being sought for 3 murders would go off like a bomb. He passed the microphone to Bublansky, who cleared his throat twice, adjusted his glasses, and stared hard at the paper with the wording they had agreed on. "The police are searching for a 26-year-old woman by the name of Lisbeth Salander. A photograph from the passport office will be distributed. We do not know where she is at present, but we believe that she is in the greater Stockholm area. The police would like the public's assistance in finding this woman as soon as possible. Lisbeth Salander is 4 feet 11 inches tall, with a slim build." He took a deep, nervous breath. He could feel the dampness under his arms. Lisbeth Salander has previously been in the care of a psychiatric clinic and is regarded as dangerous to herself and to the public. We would emphasize that we cannot say unequivocally that she is the killer, but circumstances dictate that we question her immediately to ascertain what knowledge she may have about the murders in Enskede and at Odenplan. "You can't have it both ways," shouted a reporter from an evening paper. "Either she's a murder suspect or she isn't." Bublansky gave Ekstrom a helpless look. "The police are investigating on a broad front, and of course we're looking at various scenarios. But there is reason to suspect the woman we have named, and the police consider it extremely urgent that she is taken into custody. She is a suspect due to forensic evidence which emerged during the investigation of the crime scene." "What sort of evidence?" someone in the crowded room immediately asked. "We are not going to go into it." Several reporters started talking at once. Ekstrom held up his hand and pointed to a reporter from Dagens Echo. He had dealt with him before and regarded him as objective. Inspector Bublansky said that Fröken Salander had been in a psychiatric clinic. Why was that? This woman had a troubled upbringing and encountered over the years a number of problems. She is under guardianship, and the person who owned the weapon was her guardian. Who is he? The individual who was shot in his apartment at Odenplan. At present we are withholding his name until his next of kin are notified. What motive did she have for the murders? Bublansky took the microphone and said, "We will not speculate as to possible motives." Does she have a police record? Yes. Then came a question from a reporter with a deep, distinctive voice that could be heard over the crowd. Is she dangerous to the public? Ekstrom hesitated for a moment. Then he said, "We have reports which indicate that she could be considered prone to violence in stressful situations. We are issuing this statement because we want to get in touch with her as soon as possible." Bublansky bit his lower lip. Criminal Inspector Sonia Modig was still in Advocat Bjurman's apartment at 9 o'clock that evening. She had called home to explain the situation to her husband. After 11 years of marriage, he had accepted that her job was never going to be 9 to 5. She was sitting at Bjurman's desk and reading through the papers that she had found in the drawers when she heard a knock on the door and turned to see Officer Bubble balancing 2 cups of coffee on his notebook, with a blue bag of cinnamon rolls from the local kiosk in his other hand. Wearily she waved him in. "What don't you want me to touch?" Bublansky said. "The techs have finished in here. They're working on the kitchen and the bedroom. The body's still in there." Bublansky pulled up a chair and sat down. Modig opened the bag and took out a roll. "Thanks. I was having such caffeine withdrawal I thought I'd die." They munched quietly. Modig licked her fingers and said, "I heard things didn't go so well at Lundagaden." There was nobody there. There were unopened letters for Salander, but someone called Miriam Wu lives there. We haven't found her yet either. Who is she? Don't really know. Fast is working on her background. She was added to the contract about a month ago, but she just seems to be someone who lives in the apartment. I think Salander moved without filing a change of address. Maybe she planned all this. What? A triple murder? Bublansky shook his head dejectedly. What a mess this is turning into. Ekstrom insisted on holding a press conference, and now we're going to get it in the neck from the media. Have you found anything? Apart from Bjurman's body in the bedroom, you mean? We found the empty box for the Magnum. It's being checked for prints. Bjurman has a file with copies of his monthly reports about Salander that he sent to the guardianship agency. If they are to be believed, Salander is a regular little angel, big time. Not him too, Bublansky said. Not him too what? Another admirer of Fröken Salander. Bublansky summed up what he had learned from Armansky and Blomkvist. Modig listened without interrupting. When he finished, she ran her fingers through her hair and rubbed her eyes. That sounds completely absurd, she said. Bublansky tugged on his lower lip. Modig glanced at him and had to suppress a smile. He had a rough chiseled face that looked almost brutal. But when he was confused or unsure of something, his expression turned sullen. It was in those moments that she thought of him as Officer Bubble. She had never used the nickname to his face and did not know who had coined it. But it suited him perfectly. How sure are we? The prosecutor seems sure. An APB went out nationally for Salander this evening, Bublansky said. She spent the past year abroad, and it's possible she could try to leave again. But how sure are we? He shrugged. We've taken people in for a lot less. Her prints were on the murder weapon in Enskede. Her guardian was murdered. Without trying to get ahead of things, I'm guessing it's the same weapon that was used here. We'll know tomorrow. The techs found a fairly intact bullet fragment in the bed frame. Good. There are some rounds for the revolver in the bottom desk drawer. Bullets with uranium cores and gold tips. Very useful. We have lots of paperwork that says Salander is unstable. Bierman was her guardian and he owned the gun. Bublansky said glumly. We have a link between Salander and the couple in Enskede, Michael Blomkvist. He said again. You don't sound convinced. I can't get a clear line on Salander. The paperwork says one thing, but Armansky and Blomkvist say something else. According to the paperwork, she is a developmentally disabled near psychopath. According to the two men who have worked with her, she's a skilled researcher. That's a huge discrepancy. We have no motive for Bierman and nothing to say that she knew the couple in Enskede. How much of a motive does a psychotic nutcase need? I haven't been in the bedroom yet. How does it look? I found the body prostrate against the bed. He was kneeling on the floor as if he were saying his prayers. He's naked. Shot in the back of the neck. One shot, just like in Enskede? As far as I could see. It seems that Salander, if she's the one who did it, forced him onto his knees by the bed before she fired. The bullet went up through the back of his head and exited through his face. Like an execution, then. Precisely. I was thinking, somebody must have heard the shot. His bedroom overlooks the rear courtyard, and the neighbors above and below had left for the holiday. The window was closed. Besides, she used a pillow to muffle the sound. Smart thinking. At that moment, Gunnar Samuelson from Forensics stuck his head in the door. Hi, Bubble, he said, and then turned to his colleague. Modig, we were thinking of removing the body, so we turned him over. There's something you ought to take a look at. They all went into the bedroom. Bierman's body had been placed on its back on a wheeled stretcher, the first stop on the way to the pathologist. There was no doubt about the cause of death. His forehead bore a wound 4 inches across, and a large part of his skull was hanging by a flap of skin. The blood splattered across the bed and the wall told the tale. Bublansky pouted. What are we supposed to be looking at? Modig asked. Samuelson lifted the plastic sheet which covered Bierman's lower body. Bublansky put on his glasses when he and Modig stepped closer to read the text tattooed on Bierman's abdomen. The letters were irregular and clumsy. Obviously whoever wrote them was a novice tattoo artist, but the message could not have been clearer. I am a sadistic pig, a pervert, and a rapist. Modig and Bublansky looked at each other in astonishment. Are we possibly looking at a motive? Modig said at last. Blomkvist bought a pasta meal from the 7-Eleven on his way home and put the paper carton in the microwave as he undressed and stood under the shower for 3 minutes. He got a fork and ate standing up, right out of the carton. He was hungry, but he had no appetite for food. He just wanted to take it on board as fast as he could. When it was finished, he opened a Westfalen Pilsner beer and drank it straight from the bottle. Without turning on a lamp, he stood by the window overlooking Gamla Stan for more than 20 minutes, while he tried to stop thinking. 24 hours ago he had been at his sister's house when Svensson had called him on his mobile. He and Johansson had still been alive. Blomkvist had not slept for 36 hours, and the days when he could skip a night's sleep with impunity were long gone. And he knew that he would not be able to sleep without thinking about what he had seen. The images from Enskede felt ingrained in his memory for all time. Finally he turned off his mobile and crept under the covers. At 11 o'clock he was still awake. He got up and brewed some coffee. He put on the CD player and listened to Debbie Harry singing, Maria. He wrapped himself in a blanket and sat on the living room sofa and drank coffee while he worried about Salander. What did he actually know about her? Hardly anything. She had a photographic memory and she was a hell of a hacker. He knew that she was a peculiar, introverted woman who didn't like to talk about herself, and that she had absolutely no trust in authority of any kind. She could be viciously violent. He owed his life to that. But he had had no idea that she had been declared incompetent or was under guardianship, or that she had spent any part of her teenage years in a psychiatric clinic. He had to choose whose side he was on. Sometime after midnight he decided that he couldn't accept the police's assumption that she had murdered Svensson and Johansson. At the very least, he owed her a chance to explain herself before he passed judgment. He had no idea when he nodded off, but at 4:30 a.m. he woke up on the sofa. He staggered into the bedroom and fell instantly back to sleep.
And that marks the end of the current chapter. Thank you for listening to The Book Reader. Stay tuned for the next episode tomorrow. Please subscribe for updates.